Can your healthy passion for self-improvement become a desperate, pointless obsession? That's what tech billionaire turned vampire Brian Johnson has us all wondering. He's made headlines for swapping blood with his 17-year-old son as part of an ongoing attempt to reverse his biological age. Now listen, I'm all for becoming the best version of who you were created to be, just maybe not if that person is Dracula. So let's talk about how extreme is too extreme when you're pursuing greatness. The desire to improve is a good desire. We all want to be great in many ways. A great spouse, parent, friend, great at our job, great with our money. But can the pursuit of great become unhealthy?
Vampire insane.
Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson.
He calls himself the world's most measured human.
He's spending $2 million a year on a team of 30 doctors.
To reverse aging.
Whoa.
As far as I know, it's the first time this has ever been done. You ever done a multi-generational exchange? Ever?
If you start to feel like your eyes start to itch, that's the first sign of a reaction.
What? I think it's plausible, maybe probable, that Brian Johnson started this whole journey from a healthy place. In other words, he's thinking, you know what? I've been very successful. I have money. I have time. And that means I have the resources to chase this idea of being healthy and certainly create some longevity. Now, this is a quote from Brian Johnson that I think reveals there's a certain healthy pursuit at the start of all this. He said, I would overeat every night as a result of the stress of everyday life. Every night at 7 p.m., there was nothing I could do to stop myself from committing the self-harm of overeating. Eventually, I fired Evening Brian and revoked his decision-making authority from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night. So again, on the surface, this is a healthy solution. He doesn't like who he's become, how he's acting. And so he says, with some discipline, I'm just not going to eat. From 7 to 10, I'm not going to eat. And I'm going to eat before 7, and we see this all the time popping up in any kind of health journal or blogs or Instagram influencers. So he starts there. But because he had the resources, enormous amounts of money, the freedom that comes with that, so he's got the time, and he's got the connections, he can pay his way into trying things, it's evolved into a true quest to neutralize aging. And this is a radical move here. He calls it the public science experiment to determine whether it's possible to stay the same biological age. Now, immediately I look at that and I go, I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how smart you are. There's no free lunch, folks. There's no free lunch. You are going to age. Can you slow aging? I absolutely, before I even knew who Brian Johnson was, certainly you can do some things where you age better, so maybe you could call that slowing aging. But this idea that I can reverse my aging and prolong my life, where does it end? That's the question. So what is he putting into this quest? A team of 30 doctors constantly monitor his organs and bodily functions. He eats 3 very strict meals each morning before noon, and then he fasts. He has a regimen of up to 30 supplements. No wonder he fasts. I mean, I would be full. I'm full right now thinking of 5 supplements, much less 30. And of course, he follows a very strict sleep routine in a temperature-controlled room. All things that very few people on this planet can even afford. Okay? Now, if you look at all of that right there, you could certainly say, you know what? Guy's a billionaire. Wants to be healthy. Why not? And I can see that. You could certainly compare him to an Olympic athlete, if you will, or a really committed artist or somebody who's taking on a huge achievement, whether it be a painting or a sculpture. And so there's enormous amounts of time and discipline that go into a craft like that. And so, again, feels right. Okay, sure. But he's getting absolutely crushed online. And I will say this. I think it's interesting that he is open sourcing this. He's sharing all of this. Certainly, I think he's enjoying the attention. But I think he genuinely is a guy who wants to learn. And I think there's some curiosity and some, again, personal growth ambition here to be the best version of himself. But he's being called crazy, obsessive, narcissist. And with the whole plasma switching blood with his younger son, people are calling him a vampire. And thus, we get the whole vampire thing. Now, I think a lot of this is wacky. And I think it's, in the end, it's all for naught. Can he be healthier as he ages? Will he be healthier than me if he does all this? Yeah. As I'll tell you what I'm not doing, 30 supplements a day. Life's too short to be that supplemented. Ugh, please. The other thing is I'm not willing to give up ice cream or the occasional salty snack. But there's no cheating death, folks. Wrestle with that. I would rather you wrestle with that and live a life that when you reach your death, people will say he lived well, she lived well. But this idea of living a life like this, and I would ask the question of him if he were here, do you enjoy your life? Because it feels like it's become a thing, a discipline. But I don't want to hammer him because, again, it's his choice. And then I also want to, for those of you who think this guy's nuts, he's lost his mind, everything, I just want to caution you for a second to learn from him. Because I think we're all this close to going in a route on a path that he's gone. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who is a very successful doctor who we had a real conversation a couple years ago because I got concerned about how thin he was. The guy runs all the time. He's in massive, amazing, healthy shape, right? But I thought he was actually too thin, like zero body fat. And as I began to dig a little bit, basically came out that he was running more than he had ever run before. And this guy was always a big-time runner, but he was running more and more. Instead of a 5 to 6 mile run, he was running 10 and 15 miles. I said, why? Are you training for an extreme marathon? No, I just really enjoy running that amount of time. I asked the next, to me, most obvious question, when do you do this? Well, I can't run that long in the morning, so I usually do it after work, after a full day of making rounds as a doctor. Well, he's an empty nester now, but what about your wife? Well, we have she's been really great about it. We have a really weird schedule because, I'm running for a couple of hours, and all this kind of stuff. And it just got more and more clear to me that he had gone from healthy exercise, doing something that helped him mentally, emotionally, physically, and he was actually beginning to damage his marriage. You don't ever see your wife. Why? You're running. What are you running from? What are you running to? How has this healthy passion turned into an unhealthy obsession? So where's the line? Is there a line? Or is it just, hey, you know what? This billionaire could do it. Your buddy can do it. I mean, look, if that's the way they want to live, to each his own. I think we have to keep the original problem and the original solution at the front of our minds. Because I think what happens when a passion goes to obsession is that instead of a focus on what the initial passion was about, I care deeply about solving this problem and I'm going to go after this, but we lose sight of everything else. And so it's no longer about solution, it's about finding more problems. Longevity, great idea. Healthy living, great idea. Switching blood out with your son and your dad, 30 supplements a day, crazy routines, turning yourself into an Autobot. Is that obsession or is it passion? What's the focus now? Is healthy living the focus? Or is it trying to game life? Or is it about views on YouTube? Because as a billionaire, you've been very successful in business. What else is there? Become something, somebody that a lot of people talk about. What's driving you? So I think that leads us to, we have to examine this in our own lives. What do we care deeply about? Physically, relationally, professionally. There are things that we care deeply about, but we cannot let that drive for success in a certain area, the metrics, the solution, whatever's pulling us forward, we can't let that become the aim. The aim is betterment, solve a problem, not turn the entire problem into our sole focus. What is life if we aren't human? If we become so obsessed with becoming an expert, solving this problem, getting to this place that no one has ever been before, I think the rest of us suffers. The people around us suffer. So I think it's about the right motive. I was just thinking through this and so what's the goal here? Well, to be as healthy as I possibly can, but also realize that physical health isn't the only part of my health. What about my emotional, relational, mental, spiritual health? So is this the case for Brian Johnson? Has he become obsessed? Has he gone too far? Is his version of going too far that much different than our version of going too far? We launch a company, it's going well, it's exceeded our wildest dreams, and yet it's just not enough. So we work longer, we work harder, we distance ourselves from family, we take on bad health habits. Why? A singular focus on going beyond what the initial goal or dream was. I think you've got to be honest about your true motive. I also think you've got to be honest when the motive shifts. Is it about performance? Is it about execution? That you can look back and say, look what I've done? Or is it about contribution? Being your best in order to give of your best, not being your best to keep setting the next record, and the next record. Because let me tell you something, achievement minus a significant relational human component is empty. So what's the right motive? Second, what's the game that you're playing? It's okay to gamify success, but wait a second. What if he does somehow reverse aging and he does this, and this, and yet he looks back 20 years from now and he's going, you know what? I would have felt great if I just got really good night's sleep, a lot of massages during the week, a little bit of exercise, and ate a lot of fish. What happens when the achievement wears off? Because every achievement wears off. So don't lose sight of what matters. And I think it's the contribution here on this earth that also has an eternal contribution. 1 Corinthians 9:25. I think you got to consider this, even if you've never darkened the door of a church. The Apostle Paul writes, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Now, for those of you who you're uncomfortable with that, you don't live in a spiritual world, you don't go to church, let's just pull back. Let's take the eternal challenge out of that for a moment and say, wait a second. Of all the things that we could achieve that strangers or fans or customers would acknowledge, the question is that will they be at your funeral? Will they be the ones reminiscing on the impact that you left behind? I just don't want any of us to get to our deathbeds, if we are allowed that luxury, knowing that the end is near, and do a quick scan back on our life. I don't want us to be in a position where we regret. I want us to reminisce on the things that really matter. And I got to tell you, it will not be the professional accomplishments. And if you even acknowledge professional accomplishments, it will only be the people attached to those accomplishments that were bettered by the contribution you made professionally, that you will even register in those moments. So final thought. I'm not bothered by Brian Johnson and what he's doing. I'm challenged to not fall into obsession, because I think what really matters most is not what we accomplish. It's that we lived well, because none of us are going to live forever. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, would you give us a like and then subscribe to our channel and share any of these videos that you think would be a help to others? We'll be back before you know it.